All right, what is going on, guys? So today and moving forward into the future, we're going to be doing something pretty cool. Today we're going to be talking about how to fix your data, maintaining a single source of truth as you scale. Should be a few boxes here, but it's all good. We're not even going to cover it up. We're just going to keep rolling. So in this series, guys, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing 100 videos over the next 120 days, specifically around RevOps, sales team, sales process, sales system, CRM, data, metrics, KPIs, compensation, you name it, really whatever's working for us, what's not working for our clients, what we're trying. Okay. And my goal is to do 100 videos in the next 120 days, which is a lot, but it means we're going to cover a ton of really cool stuff. All I ask, subscribe, like, comment, ask questions. If you don't know who I am, my name's Aaron Platt. I own a company called Sales Momentum. We've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. We're about 800 plus companies right now that we've worked with in terms of automating, systemizing the sales team and the sales process in general. Okay. And a lot of that starts with data. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. My goal with these videos is really just to help you guys get from a distress state to a eustress state, meaning going from where things feel really, really painful and you're not seeing growth on the other side, or you don't know a way out, to obviously a eustress state, okay, which I'm just going to read here. Eustress is a sales team that represents positive stress, stimulates growth, focus, and it's marked by manageable challenges. So basically when stuff pops up, you're able to actually execute against it, and it's more of an opportunity than just a bottleneck that really sets you back. You can scan this at any point, ask as many questions. I am going to be going live quite a few times throughout the week, and I'll be answering them all there. We've worked with a bunch of really cool companies, and this is going to be not something I'm going to show directly to what they specifically or telling you who I'm talking about, but you're going to be able to see a lot of the behind the scenes, which is cool. So let's dive in. So let's talk about why everyone's data is fucked. Okay. Let's just start there. Okay. So one thing I want you guys to understand is there's evolution phases. And actually, before I get into this, I actually got this format and the motivation to do this from, he's got a bunch of awesome shit. If you're online running a business, his stuff is killer. So met him a few weeks ago, started watching his stuff, and got motivated. So go follow him, check him out. Now let's get back into it. So first thing I'm going to talk about is just evolution phases of a business or a sales team specifically. I'm going to talk about what lack of process in terms of maintaining data actually does, what happens when you try and track everything. Okay. And then we're going to talk about how to fix that. And then I've got some cool things that we're going to cover as well. So first thing, evolution phases in a business, right? The way I look at an evolution phase is there's really three of them. When we're looking at kind of a sales team specifically. I'm going to talk about the first one just so you kind of understand this. And I think this will help you get a really good understanding as to, one, why data goes bad, but also why you might be constantly kind of going around the monopoly board, constantly passing go and starting over, or maybe in a state of burnout. Okay. So when you start a business or you start a sales team, you really start doing it yourself. Okay. And it sucks. Okay. Revenue's volatile, right? You're figuring stuff out. You're trying a bunch of stuff. You're doing stuff. You don't have data yet. You don't have a proven process, right? And ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to find one or two things that really start to work, and you're going to start to prove that process. Okay. That could be DMs. It could be, doing videos like this. It could be, cold data. It could be cold email. It could be, doesn't matter. Whatever you're doing, it's going to start to work eventually once you start to find kind of proper messaging and all these things, and you're going to prove a process. And that's going to build a little bit of a floor around your revenue. Right. So if you're starting from zero, think around like the 50 to 100K mark, right? You've kind of proven a process, you get some stability, right? Things start to feel good. And then you go into teaching it. So you bring your first people on, it starts to hurt, right? Revenue gets volatile again, and then you hit another floor, right? And that's when you start to put some systems in. Okay. So you start tracking some stuff, you start automating some of the stuff, you get to leads quicker, you have a good dialing system, you put in a CRM, right? You put some infrastructure around your proven process. Okay. It starts to feel good again. The revenue floor starts to level out, right? And then you go into managing it. So now you're managing teams. Okay. So you're managing a meeting cadence, you're managing KPIs, you're running payroll, you're doing all these different things. And it starts to hurt again because you have to train yourself on how to do this. It's a different type of skill set each time you go through this. Okay. And ultimately, when you get to the end of phase one, right, when you start to kind of crack out of that 100K, 200K a month mark, you really need to make sure that you have proper expectations and accountability across the sales process. Okay. That means visibility. Okay. On metrics, on people, on process, on the system itself, you need to have some control. And what ends up happening is people skip a lot of these steps and they do a lot of what I'm about to go over. and they don't have a process in which they're actually maintaining and managing data so that they can make good decisions, right? A lot of times when people get into these early stages, they start working on 50 different things. Okay. And there's actually a book that if any of you guys have not read, you should. And it's called 10X is easier than 2X. Okay. It's a good title. But ultimately what they talk about in that book is that, especially early on, and even when you're much larger, there's always going to be one thing that's going to produce 10X the results of you trying to do many different things that are all 2X opportunities. Okay. So data helps you find that 10X opportunity in a giant slew of a bunch of 2X opportunities, right? And what happens is people get too bogged down in trying to do 10 or 15 different things, when in reality, if they just did one thing really well, okay, and they just focused on the one thing that's going to drive the business or the revenue, the profitability the most, okay, they'd actually get the same results as doing all of those things really, really well, but they're going to have a much higher chance of success, obviously, by focusing on one thing rather than 10 to 15. And it's going to be much more manageable. Okay. So anyways, if you're in burnout, try again. You're constantly going around go, kind of here's the infrastructure, or not the infrastructure, but the process that you kind of need to think through. Now, going back into this. So lack of process, right? Data is something that needs to be maintained. Okay. It's not something you just set up once or twice and look at whenever you need it. It's something that you need to be diligent around every single day and each week. And the only way to do that is if you put in a process that allows you to set specific times that you're going in maintaining data. Okay. Now, if you're trying to maintain hundreds of reports, okay, which is why I put drill down, drill down, drill down, a lot of the times people start with good practice around data, and ultimately they end up starting to try and track hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different things. And that's when they start tracking everything, and ultimately they start tracking nothing, okay? Because nothing's accurate. They try and work on a million different things at once, and they can't trust their data. So every time they want good numbers, they have to go and spend hours trying to get those numbers. And then by the time they have them, those numbers are no longer relevant, okay? And I see this over and over and over again. It happens with companies that are doing millions a month and companies that are just getting started, okay? So this process that I'm about to go over will help you address that. And it's the best way that you can get the drill down metrics that you need, but just by focusing on 8 to 12 numbers. Okay. So that's going to lead me into baseline. Okay. So how do we fix and maintain data? So specifically for this part, and what I'm going to talk about, we're just going to be talking through specifically from when a lead enters the system. So from when a lead comes into your sales process, all the way through the show rate, to the closing process, okay, and that initial sale. So think from lead in to initial sale, okay? Now, baselines can be set to quite literally anything. And baseline, all it is it's going to be, let me get down here. It's going to be your control metrics, okay? So when we're looking at a baseline, right, we're looking at 8 to 12 numbers typically, right? Sometimes it's 15, just depends on kind of the sales process that you're running, right? But these 8 to 12 numbers, okay, are your control metrics. And these 8 to 12 numbers are what creates all of the other reporting and drill down metrics that you're going to want. Now, going back to my point is when you're tracking everything, you're not tracking anything. What happens with companies is they start trying to track all of these different things. And I'm going to use something super simple. They start spending a bunch of time trying to track close rate, okay? The problem is that when they're tracking close rate, they don't even have the accurate number of deals closed, okay, for specific time periods, or they don't even have the right number of closed deals in general, which means no matter how much time you spend on these drill down reports, they're not accurate, okay? So when we're looking at a baseline, this is what allows us to create all of the reporting. And just for an example here and a point of reference, all of these dashboards, every single thing that you're seeing here, okay, all of these numbers are controlled and generated from those 8 to 12 numbers. Everything you're looking at here. Okay. So with that being said, if you want to maintain and control your data and make sure that it's accurate, we need to spend time controlling and maintaining and managing these numbers. Okay. And in theory and hypothetically, as long as these formulas and these calculations are set up correctly against these numbers, then they will remain accurate. And all you have to do is spend your time here. Okay. So that's what baseline is. Okay. Now, finding baseline is really, really straightforward and simple. What you're going to do is you're really just going to start with the wireframe. So go left to right in your process. Very, very simple. Just think big animal pictures, box 1, right? How much ad spend did we spend this month? Okay. Or last month, right? Box 2, how many leads do we create? Box 3, how many were considered bad data? Okay. Box 4, how many outbound calls did we make from the setting team? How many connections did we get? How many sets did we get that were outbound? How many sets did we get that were self-booked? How many total discovery calls did we get, right? You're just going to go left to right. Really good example of this, just a kind of standard baseline, is right here, right? Ad spend, leads, bad data, junk, outbound calls, connection, total discos booked outbound. Okay. So meaning we actually called them and got them set over the phone, right? Total discos booked inbound, meaning they self-booked through the funnel, right? Or through anything that you guys have out there, right? How many were completed, right? If you're doing a 2-call process, how many total closing calls, right? Same thing inbound. If you're, doing conditional logic on the application or something along those lines, people can book directly in, right? Versus outbound, how many closing calls are completed, offers made, deals closed, revenue generated, cash collected. Okay. Now, going back to this, right? Creating your baseline, again, you're just going left to right in your process. So think very high level. As soon as you start going into calculations and stuff along those lines, you're not in your baseline anymore. You're in a drill down or a layer 1 metric. Okay. We just want to create the baseline. Okay. Because again, we can maintain and manage these 8 to 12 numbers, and all of the other reporting that we're going to make in the future is going to maintain accuracy, and you're going to be able to be confident in it. If you just start jumping straight towards the drill down metrics and everything else, you're never going to have accurate reporting. Okay. So once we have this, okay, core foundations of baseline, and baseline is our, basically foundation for how we run revenue operations. We're always competing with the trailing 90, okay? Meaning every single quarter, right? So if we're in quarter 2, right? Or right now we're in Q4, right? We are competing with Q3, okay? That's how we draw our baseline, okay? So just going into this, once we have our numbers, right? We're going to basically pull the last 90 days so that we can establish our baseline. Okay. And all this number right here is just an average across these 3 months. So month 1, month 2, month 3. Okay. And if we're in Q4, that's going to be Q3. Okay. So month 1, month 2, month 3 of Q3. Okay. And that's going to create your averages, and it's going to create you a baseline. Now, what this allows us to do is it allows us to look at the average. Okay. Allows us to create our velocity metrics, our revenue metrics, everything else along those lines, okay, from these numbers, okay, and then we can start playing with them and seeing, okay, if, for example, let's say our disco show rate went up by, 5%, right? Okay, well, that's $110,000 that we're leaking annually. It's about 10 grand a month, okay, and it's about a 5% increase, okay, so maybe that's not the lever that we focus on. But it allows you to start to play with these numbers and ideate on where you should be looking to set initiatives for month 1, month 2, and month 3 of Q4. Okay. And ultimately, this is where we kind of start to ideate around where our biggest areas of opportunity are and how we're looking at the data. But ultimately, every single quarter, we're establishing a new baseline. So as we get through month 1, month 2, month 3 of Q4, right, that will establish our new baseline, right, for what we're going to compete against in Q1 of 2026. Okay. Now, going back to this, right? So we're always competing against the previous period. Now, the way that we do this, and the way that you should do this, is when we're looking at baseline. If you guys want this resource, it'll be linked down below. You guys can go. It's $27. You can grab it. It comes with a ton of training, step-by-step on how to set it up, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But ultimately, what we're doing with this is every single week on Monday morning, we have our, what we call momentum operator, but our ops guy basically going in and pulling these reports, okay, directly from what we would call our, and I'll actually show you guys, we run off of HubSpot. You can do this with anything though, from our baseline dashboard, okay, which is the least sexy report, but it is the most important report. Okay. So it looks something like this. And this is just a demo, but you'll be able to see it, which covers all of our specific metrics that create our baseline. Okay. Now, the reason that we're doing this is because if anything seems off, right, this person's going to be able to catch it every single Monday and make sure that we have 100% accuracy in these numbers, so that the rest of these dashboards, right, we don't have to look at one by one by one. We can just make sure that our baseline is maintaining accuracy. Okay. So they're going to take these numbers, drop it in week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And when you're setting this up and when you're going through this initially, right, you're going to be able to set monthly targets for each KPI, okay, or each metric, okay. And you're going to be able to see if you're overachieving, underachieving, on track, off track, etc. And you're going to be able to link up each spot that metric is generated from if you're going to run some automated reporting. Okay. If it's manual, you can start there. Okay. And ultimately what's going to happen is each time you close out a month, okay, so let's say this was, instead of August 1st, it was September 1st, right? It's going to change these dates. Now you're going to be running this for, obviously, September. But basically what this is going to allow you to do is this will update, obviously, for the month. Okay, it's going to tell you how much up or down you are against your previous quarter's baseline. Okay. And ultimately what we're going to be doing with this is we're going to be picking one initiative per month that's going to drive the most amount of revenue or profit, okay, for the least amount of disruption to the team, to the system, to the process, okay? And this is where things get really, really cool. Okay, and I'm actually going to show you guys one initiative that we actually just ran for a client that added $190,000 in 1 month. And it was actually the easiest thing that we could have done. So basically, when you're closing this stuff out, right, we're looking for the biggest area of opportunity. And for this specific client, when we were looking at the numbers, okay, they were looking at their closers. So they were saying, hey, we got to look at the closing rate. We got to look at the offer rate. We got to look at all these things. What we decided to do instead is we looked at the average number of touches. And this is where drill down reporting starts to come into play. Okay. So we're going into the month. It's the end of the month. We're closing out baseline. We're looking at this. Okay. So just like you're doing a weekly every Monday, right? You're going to set it in your calendar, close out for the weekly baseline. You're doing the same thing at the end of every single month. So you're closing the monthly baseline and you're selecting your initiative for the next month. Okay. So when we came into this month for month 1 of this quarter, what we realized is that their average number of touches per new lead, okay, in the first 15 days was 4 touches. Okay. We thought that was a little low, which it is, right? But then what we did is we drilled down into the data and we looked at what was the average number of outbound calls that we get per new leads or per new lead per set, meaning how many times on average do we touch a lead before they actually book a call? And that was 6. So there was a delta of 2. Okay. So instead of trying to do 10, 15, 20 different things, the only thing that we focused on was with the setters, how do we get them to go from 4 to 8 touches per new lead in the first 15 days? And what we did is we got to 9.5. Ultimately, we put in some better lead scoring. We added a refresh system. So once they touched the lead, it would disappear for 2 hours and then it would repopulate and they would have to clear their queues very, very quickly. They were getting to leads a little bit faster. So we put in some better speed of lead tracking. But we also made it a point, right, every single week to be tracking speed of lead and average number of touches. Okay. And the way that we did that was, for example, for our drill down reports, we went into, let's see if I've got here we go. Cool. We basically set it up so we could see the count of contacts, right, for each one of our setters, the count of calls, the average number of times they touch them in the first 10 days, okay, and their average time it takes to actually get them set. And then we set up a good speed of lead report, which looks like something over here, wherever it is. Boom, boom, boom. Cool. Yeah, this would be a demo, but still give you the good gist of what this is. So we started setting up speed of lead reporting, tracking each one of them, right? And then average number of outbound calls this month per contact, right? Average amount of dials per set. And again, this is a demo screenshot, but you'll get the gist. Now, the cool thing about these reports, just as a side note, is in HubSpot, you can set it up so you're competing with the average of the previous quarter. So for example, let me go to a report that's really easy to look at. Actually, let me go into, this will be fine. Actually, here we go. So once we have our averages or a baseline from the previous quarter, you can set these gauges, and these gauges will tell you if you're in green, that means you're doing better than the previous quarter, right? If you're in red, that means you're doing worse than the previous quarter, right? And if you're in yellow, that just means you're on track. Okay. So anyways, digressing from that, right? Ultimately with that client, all we were looking to do was raise the number of touches per lead in the first 15 days. And we got to 9.5. Okay. And what that did for this client was instead of increasing ad spend, instead of, increasing the number of bodies or setters or closers or doing any other stuff that we're thinking about doing, all we did was just focus on getting to 8 touches for that 30-day period. We got to 9.5. That added 10% revenue, which is about 190 grand for this company. Okay. In 1 month. Okay. And ultimately what we're wanting to set up is every single month, you should be able to look back and see your hit miss percentage on initiatives you're running, and you should be focused on one lever every single month. Okay. And the way that we're doing this is maintaining accuracy in the reporting by weekly closeouts. Okay. And selecting the initiative that's going to grow the business the fastest, right, with the highest chance of success, with the least amount of disruption every single month. Okay. Just one lever. Okay. Once you start getting really good, you can start running bi-weekly sprints. You can start doing multiple levers per quarter or per month. Sorry. But when you're just getting started, this is how you're going to do it. Okay. So going back to this, covered previous quarter, we're always competing with the previous period. Okay. We're setting all of our goals, our targets against that previous quarter. So for example, if we're going into a new quarter, we're looking at the baseline, right? If you want to increase revenue, right, then maybe set the target for a 25% lift and then reverse engineer from there, right? So if you did 100 grand, how do we get to 125,000, right, this quarter? Or if you did $1 million, how do we get to 1.25, right? And then you're going to set your initiatives based on how you're going to get to that, okay? You're always going to set up a meeting cadence, specifically Mondays for weekly closeout. That's how you're going to send out if we're on track, off track, to the sales director, the CMO, everything that's going on there, okay? And also how you're going to maintain accuracy in your reporting. And then your monthly closeout, which is how you're going to select your initiative. And then you have your quarterly, okay, baseline review, which is reviewing the quarter. So you're reviewing the initiatives you ran, the lifts that you produced, okay, and ultimately what you achieved over the quarter and what the new baseline is so that you can set your targets for the next quarter, okay? So very, very simple, but people just overcomplicate this, okay? Now, we talked about finding the constraint, highest impact, lowest disruption, okay, and how you're actually going to go about doing that, okay? And here's kind of the key, all right? So when you're talking about data and data cleanliness and accuracy and being confident, right, there needs to be one person in the company that's responsible for closing this baseline weekly, monthly, quarterly, right? And it shouldn't be multiple people doing this. It should be one person in the company, okay? Every Monday, they're closing the weekly closeout. They're maintaining accuracy. If they're seeing weird stuff, they're going in and fixing it, getting the accurate numbers, okay? And they're sending that report out to the team, okay? That one person will remove the entire leadership team from trying to get accuracy in data and doing a bunch of different stuff that's going to make things worse, okay? And allow them to work with their teams, with their initiatives, and focus on growth, okay? When everybody's sucked into the system and data, right, or trying to get data, it basically takes away from what you and your team can do on a month-to-month, week-to-week, day-to-day basis, okay? Process. We have to have weekly closeouts every week. It doesn't matter how automated your reporting is, you have to be closing out the baseline weekly. Those 8 to 12 numbers create accuracy and confidence in every other report that you're going to build. And when you find something that's red or yellow, right, or something that's not doing well, that's when you go drill down into the metrics that you need. And you're going to ultimately, if you set this up right, you're going to be creating new drill downs each month that are going to allow you better optics, but you're not just going to be spinning out and creating a bunch of reporting that you think you need, okay? Your OS around the sales team, the marketing, your client success, it should be built from a drill down perspective, right, on a month over month basis based on what data you need to find, okay? And where your kind of curiosity leads you into how you're going to look at the data, okay? And this is a practice that you have to do it consistently, okay? It's not something you set up once and then forget about, okay? Monthly closeout, you're always going to be selecting your initiative. Again, read the book, 10X is easier than 2X. It'll help a ton, okay? And then quarterly is when you're going to actually look across your quarter and see your hit miss on your initiatives, what you did well, where your lifts came, right? Who's doing great, who's not doing great, et cetera. And you're going to close out the entire new baseline so that you can set targets for the next quarter, okay? Now, when it comes to systems, there is one thing that we do quite often on the quarterly closeout, which I'll actually pull up for you guys. Let me see. Engine scoring. Okay, actually, this is it. So one thing that we do every quarter that will help a ton is we go through kind of a SWOT analysis for each primary engine. So for basically marketing, we go through how paid ads are doing, right? Current process overview, strengths, weaknesses, anything that's happening, score, owner, where is it tracked, how well we're doing, right? Last 90-day metrics for the setter engine. So front end, right? From lead in to actually getting that initial set. So we'll look at ad spend, leads, bad data junk, inbound discos, inbound closer calls, stuff along those lines, right? Same thing for your closer side, and then same thing for your show rate. And what this allows you to do is pull the whole team together each quarter when you have your new baseline and get some of the insights that you might not otherwise have by talking to your team and going over what's working, what's not working, what they see, what you don't see, what you think might be true, and you can kind of corroborate with everybody and make sure that this is good. Okay, I'm going to go probably into this a lot more in depth because this is a big piece for companies that really want to scale quickly and just maintain control. But ultimately, platforms, right? So if you're on something like HubSpot, right, you're going to be able to build really good reporting, but reporting gets built when you're building the system. If you build the system and try and bolt on reporting afterwards, it's never going to work. Okay. And no matter how automated your reporting is, okay, you have to establish a baseline because that's where your control is going to come from. It's where you're going to actually be able to maintain accuracy and confidence in your numbers. Okay. If you're on something like GHL or Close, or you have a bunch of other stuff strung together, this will really help you because you're going to have to go into some of these platforms each Monday and pull these data, or you're going to have to bring everything to a data lake, right? There's a lot of different things that you can do. You should check out Coefficient. It helps you basically just aggregate a bunch of raw data into sheets that you can pull from, which is really nice. But ultimately, your platforms are going to build up, and this is how you're going to maintain accuracy across everything. So just quick recap, guys. Evolution. You're going to start doing it, then teaching it, then managing it, right? Data is going to get kind of blown out. You're not going to have a process around maintaining numbers, making decisions from them. You may be building tons of reports that are unnecessary or are just inaccurate because you don't have a baseline set up. And you're going to try and track everything, which means you're tracking nothing, okay? To combat this, just set up a baseline, right? Go left to right in your process, find the 8 to 12 highest numbers. So ad spend, leads, calls, connections, sets, completed sets, right? Closing sets, completed closing sets, offers made, deals closed, revenue, cash, right? That's a good baseline to start from, okay? Not drill downs, not conversions, because you're going to get all of your conversions and your calculations and your formulas from that baseline, okay? So find your 8 to 12 to rule them all, maintain accuracy, create your baseline. Again, you can get this resource. It'll help you set it up. It'll walk you through a bunch of training. There's a ton of stuff that comes with it, okay? And you're going to be competing from your previous trailing 90. So once you have your baseline, you're going to go get that data from the last 90 days. Okay, that's going to give you some really good insights on what you should be spending time on. You're going to calculate where your biggest areas of opportunity are. You're going to set a weekly cadence. I usually run Monday to Monday, so you can close out your baseline each week. Your monthly cadence, which is going to be selecting your initiative and reviewing the month, right? And your quarterly cadence, which is going to be establishing your new baseline as well as reviewing the quarter, okay? One initiative per month, okay? Find the constraint with the highest impact, lowest disruption, and just crush it, okay? That's what you're doing on a month-to-month basis. You're going to grow faster than most people can even think is possible. Why? Because you're just focused on the right thing, okay? Not focused on a ton of different things. You're focused on one thing, and you're constantly solving for the right thing, okay? With that being said, put one person in responsibility of this, right? Give them the resource, have them track it, show them how to do it, link up where they're going to get the numbers from, and make sure that they're constantly second guessing, is this number accurate? Making sure that there is a confidence of at least 90% in your baseline, okay? Process weekly, monthly, quarterly closeouts, and then make sure your platforms are set up in a way where you can get the data that you need, okay? So with that being said, I hope this helps. This is video 1. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, feel free to scan here, and I'll be answering them live. I'm going to be going live a few times a week, and I'll be posting these videos once per week, Monday through Friday. We're going to get into the weeds, talk about some other cool stuff, talk about system. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different other stuff. So that being said, like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will see you tomorrow.